S&P holds its gains, Nasdaq stays above a critical level, Bitcoin moves over a major inflection point, why Tesla was up $19, RIVN up 18%, we're going to explain why, massive breakout in MicroStrategies, Mara breaks 2023 new highs, New York Stock Exchange margin debt is creeping higher, we're going to explain what that means, smart money, dumb money, and the impending convergence, the inversion of the 2-year and 10-year Treasury, the most misunderstood graph out there today, and what people are getting wrong. We have a lot to cover. Let's get to it. Hey everybody, welcome back. So the S&P, we're going to get to just the basics here. Currently above the 12, the 22, and the 55, which if you are new here, that's what I use. These are SMAs, and I just find them the most helpful, especially during these periods of time. But it's important just to note, we never really got to that 22, kind of made a U-turn when we got to the 12, popped over. I think what's more pertinent to me is Friday. And then what happened yesterday on the short day. So we very easily could have fallen back. Obviously, futures markets open today, but no one's paying attention to it. But what's happening is we're staying at the top end of this bar. We're not coming down and testing it. When you see that, you want to be aware of that. Okay, there's a little test I do. I'll take a fib retracement and I'll just drop it from top to bottom on a bar. And I'll see if I'm going to come down to even 50% of that bar. And that'll tell me the strength of this bar. There's a couple other ways to do it by determining if there's some kind of candlestick pattern here, which I utilize. Back here there was, but here I don't really have anything that I would hang my hat on as a pattern. What I would say is the fact that I'm above that 50% line. That's all I really need right now. That's a big deal to me. I would have thought that on a light volume day with the volatility, we would have come back, retested. And I'm saying that as somebody that is pretty bullish, but the fact that we can't even come back and retest on a weekday, usually those kinds of days are the days we shake people out, right? For example, we didn't benefit from Apple, which is the single largest name out there right now in the S&P. Apple actually came down. So what we're doing is we're seeing a broadening, and we're going to get into a couple different sectors here, but we're seeing a broadening going straight across, and we held. Now, if we just drill into a smaller time frame and take a look at it, and what we'll do here is use this little pullback chart, click off of here. We're going to get rid of volume, and I want to leave the RSI up for a minute. And I just want to get into a 15-minute chart and show you a couple things that I thought were somewhat interesting. So you should probably already see it, but let's just put it in, just in case you don't. If you come from the top here and you just come straight across, what are we doing? Well, we're making lower highs. Well, I don't really want to see that, right? But what am I doing here? Well, we could take out the anomaly or we can leave the anomaly in. I take out the anomaly because there's more data points. Wherever I have more data points is how I draw the lines. I could do a video on it. Because, I mean, we know wicks are what, right? They're price rejection. So actually, you know what? If you want me to do a video on just how I draw my lines, because technical analysis is an art and a science, just drop it in the comments and I'll do it, because it wouldn't even be that long, but at least it would let people know, like, why am I not using this versus why am I using this, right? So you can see what's happening here. So you go, okay, well, now we're wedged in here. Which way are we going to go? Well, like always, nobody ever knows. But when you start looking at that, what do you have? Well, go into the hourly and now look at that. Well, now I've got a pendant, right? I've got this pendant up here. I've got the anomaly that we just talked about here. Here's the pendant flag. And why I'm forming a flag, this RSI is setting up. Now, if you don't know how to read RSI, you're probably saying, well, it's going down. How's that setting up? Well, look at what happens when this type of movement takes place, right? So in other words, you're setting up a DTL, and eventually you're going to break that DTL. Now, there'd be a couple things, downward trend line. So there'd be a couple things that would scare me if I believe what I believe. If I start getting below that 50 line, that's a concern of mine. 50 line on RSI is a demarcation line for me, and it usually should be a demarcation line for you. You can see when you are below that 50, what happens? We continue that downward trajectory, bonk, 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 right? And then flip it, bonk, 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 right? RSI I utilize, it's one of the only leading indicators that's out there. There's a couple other ones. You can do it with EMA clouds that will give you kind of a leading indicator. Ichimoku cloud, leading indicator. I did a video on that. It was actually my most popular educational video. So you can see where my head is and what I think is going to happen here. I think we're going to push. Now, obviously, I have no way of knowing that. We did say about 2 weeks ago, right around here, that we were due for about a 4% pullback maximally, and that's pretty much what happened. I want to be real clear about this. When would we get 3%? I did not know it was going to happen in a day. I gave it a window of about 30 days, but it's there and it pulled back. And this makes your life as an investor, not even just a trader, but as an investor, very easy. Because if you break right here and you break that level, well, now you know 43.6625. Investors just might want to remember that. If you make that lower low, well, okay, well, that uptrend's busted, period. That's not a debate, right? There's certain fundamental things that we just have to pay attention to, and that would be one of them. So overall, Monday's action, I thought it was great. Nasdaq, we had to stay above one thing. We had one thing we had to do, and we did it. And I think it's pretty pertinent. Now, a lot of people will say we're overbought, and I agree we're overbought. The bottom line with overbought, hopefully you can see it here before it's too late. 1, 2, 3, right? Okay, so in other words, we're overbought, I'm not going to buy. We're overbought, I'm not going to buy. Okay, so if you went on that theory because you didn't know how to use RSI properly, right? Remember, RSI indicators, when people say they don't work, to me, it's the equivalent of somebody wielding a hammer and they don't know how to use the hammer, right? A hammer in someone's hand, like myself, maybe I could hang a painting, right? Or a picture. Okay, a hammer in someone else's hand and they can build a house, right? It just depends on the skill set of the individual. So if you take a look at this, if you didn't buy because you're over, you missed 11% on the Nasdaq because, quote, we're too high. Too high is not a thing. What you want to do is just utilize your demarcation lines and then see how you act at those demarcation lines, right? I think you can see how you were rolling here. We just talked about these DTLs and what happens when they break. And we just talked about the S&P having one. So you're going to want to watch this 15.2. I have it marked off at 15.284. What I'd like to do at those levels is just kind of drill into them and then just see if I'm seeing anything. So here's the hourly, and you can see the flag coming straight across, right? I mean, you can all see this, but I think that's pertinent. Why couldn't we even come down? Why couldn't we even test the levels? Are we going to say it's because of Tesla? I mean, we're going to get into that in a moment. But I think it was just the overall broad-based buying of the market. And we are seeing signs of that. One thing that we're not really talking about is IWM. Now, we've been struggling for some time here. And I'm not really going to use moving averages because I don't really use moving averages if we're basing because they don't really tend to work as well. You're just basically, it's like an EKG chart. So if we come here, we just kind of see how this is going. Well, you're starting to get tighter and tighter in here. Now, this is months away. And remember, 15.9% of this is KRE names. Not KRE, but just those kinds of names, those kinds of regionals. Now, you are seeing some support in the regionals while we're here. But do we really want to get involved there? To me, it's been the same soup. Okay, I don't know when they're going to raise rates again. This is one that we bought in the Alpha Chasers community right here at 8 and change. We're still in it. We're up $3 on an $8 stock, and I see no reason to get out of it. We actually moved it from swing trade position to long trade position in the portfolio. So if you come across here, I mean, I just don't see how you're not getting here. The other one, FCNCA, again, if you've been following these videos and they're all linked together, you'll note that the ones that the FDIC allowed to buy assets that actually won the assets from the FDIC have just had monster moves. And I expect NYCB to do the same thing. It's not exciting. You're not going to cheer for it every single day. It's just going to grind higher and higher. And sometimes that's not the worst thing in the world. Now, before we get into Tesla and some of these other names, I just want to be real clear about something. This XLY and the breakout of the XLY that we're seeing, this is becoming a leader. Down to 70 on the RSI, unable, right? You can't break it. And then you bounce. Now, you have some resistance up here that you have to get through, and we know the market's through that. So how are you saying it's a leader when it's not through XLC kind of levels or XLK kind of levels, right? And XLK is obviously 44%. Apple and Microsoft combined. XLC, you want to think Meta, Google, etc. Right? Okay. So you know who the players are, Netflix. Why XLY? Well, I look at positioning of hedge funds and where they're positioned, and then I look for anomalies. They are at a 40-year low on retail. And the majority of people are because they're expecting this recession. Now, we're going to get into the recession here in a little bit and talk about it, but this is just grinding higher. And I always go through our winners in the Alpha Chasers community and look at the winners and see what they have in common. Is there some theme that I'm missing? I'm very big on themes, right? Because you could be wrong, and if you have the right industry, you could still be right. What you're trying to do is just get as many things in favor, right? Just to create an edge. So for those that don't know, the way that I look at the world is very simple. I look at it top down, right? What I will tend to look at is, I guess the best way to say it is this. So like I'll look at it and go, okay, I want to look at what is the stock market doing, right? Then after I look at the stock market, okay, what are the top sectors? Okay, what are the top names in that sector, right? So if you look at the Nasdaq, you'd go, okay, Nasdaq. Click off of this for a second. I would go Nasdaq, right? So here we go. Let's get to it. Okay, Nasdaq looks great. Well, who's leading in the Nasdaq? Well, semis are leading in the Nasdaq. Okay, what's the number one name in semis right now? Well, NVIDIA is. Okay, that type of work, right? So when I start drilling into XLY, I start doing something very similar and looking at the S&P and going, well, they're at 40-year lows, and there's certain stocks in here that are just not pulling back. So again, if you've been following for some time, you'll know that we've been talking about race since about the 280s. And this is another one that we're in the community, and bought the breakout, the retest, added, and now I think we're heading to this 370. In the room, I think I have a 340 target price. I'm off. I think it's going to go much higher. I mean, you've got a 2-year backlog, but I have to really watch how I act. Oops, I got to get used to this tool. I really have to act when we get up to that level. But I like these names, and I would not pay attention to just tech. I think you're going to miss the boat here on some really simple trades. You might want to wait for pullbacks. You always get that second opportunity when people think they're not going to get it, but just start looking at retail. Now, I'll give you one that we traded before that just looks to me like it's setting up again, and you're not getting any kind of pullback, really. Gap down, flush everybody out. But when we start looking at these flush outs that are happening on names like ON, and we go to settings, I'm just going to drop the earnings in for a second so you can see this is earnings, and then everyone's, oh, earnings bad, earnings good, right? It's kind of silly, but look at these gaps. Look at the retest. Look at the buy after the gap fill, okay? That's pretty clear, crystal clear, right? Wicks are what? Price rejection. So you would see that right here. And maybe what you want to do is just see how are you acting in regards to those moving averages that I look at. And you can see all the confluence down here. And what happened when you got to that 55? Well, that was it. It was on. Right? They held the 55. There's your break. You could have used this as a stop and been in for $1. Well, what do you do now? Well, I think now you might want to just see if you get the opportunity for it to pull back. But these are the kinds of names that I would be drilling into. These are the kinds of names that are really starting to rally, and nobody's paying attention to them. Alta was one, everybody hated it here on earnings. But if you remember these names, right, and let's just go through this. If you remember them and you look at these, and let's clean this all off, and you say, okay, well, nobody wants to own it here. Well, everybody wanted to own it here, right? So did the story change, or do you have one quarter where things are not going the way that they were supposed to go? Because if you look at those quarters when they come out, sometimes they're the greatest buying opportunities, right? Every single major pullback on this stock has been a great buying opportunity if you're looking long enough. Now, it'll be that way until it's not, right? So you go back 10 years, let's go to here. So you can see that every pullback's been a buying opportunity, right? It depends on your time frame, but it's really hard to beat this. So I would drill into these names. I would not sleep on these names. And as you sit here and you watch something like an Alta, well, this is something we bought when it broke out, and then it just kept giving us confirmation over and over again. We're in the 440s. I think we're up like $30 now. But you really want to drill into those retail names, and you want to drill into the specialty retail names, okay? So one that the people are playing in the room, I do not have a position in, but they are playing Lulu. Now, to me, it's a little junky, and there's a lot going on there. But I could be wrong, and they could be right. Right? It's just, I want to clear a bunch of this nonsense before I go and put some money to work. So what I'm looking for is get me above something like this, and then maybe you'll have my attention, right? And that's really what I'm looking for, something like that, or why bother? I really only want to, there's so many good ideas out there right now. I really only want to buy the best ones for me. So With that said, let's get into Bitcoin, but do not sleep on the retail names. There's going to be a tremendous amount of money there. And I'm going to explain a couple things here at the end in regards to the inverted yield curve that people are just losing on. But here we are on Bitcoin. Okay, this is your level. This was your breakdown. This was your first control bar, right? That you had to get over after you got through these. You can see the turn here, and then you break. Can't get through. Now, resistance becomes support, right? And that's always important for us to understand that. So what you want to see is you want to see that. So, oops, I got to get used to this. So you can, there we go. Now I got it. So you can see right here how you stopped, and you can see right here how we're holding. So that is a critical level for us. Now, a couple things to take a look at here. I don't know where we wind up going with this. I have no idea where this winds up going. But if I was to sit here and say, okay, well, what's the next technical level? Well, you'd have to say, well, I have to get through these. Okay, well, that puts me at 33, right? Because you would just say this is where the algos are sitting because that's where they stop. So those supports become what? Resistance. Okay, and then after that, you would look at this and go, okay, well, where's the real breakdown? Where did the breakdown happen? What bar is in control up here? That bar is in control. And that's kind of how I look at the world, just there. So you're looking at this saying 33, 34.2, then you're roughly around 40. I think that is possible here. I really do. And I think it's very interesting that now you have names like BlackRock that all of a sudden want to do this ETF, and you have all these companies come out of the world doing ETFs, and you think to yourself, well, why would you be doing those ETFs now? Well, I have my belief on it, and I'll give you complete conjecture. GBTC's in front of the appellate court. They're expecting that decision any day now. If you read the transcript, which I did, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, I think they have a shot here. And people like BlackRock and ARK and Fidelity pay actual attorneys. Right? I'm not schooled legally at all on this, obviously, but I think it's very important that, the more you read, the more you can understand, but I don't have that professional background. But the point I'm getting at now is they have access to the best lawyers in the world. They have access to the best appellate researchers in the world, right? Because they're out playing for billions and billions of dollars. So I always have this saying, you want to see what they're saying, but you really want to see what they're doing, right? Watch what they say, but look at what they do, right? So if you think from that perspective and go, well, why in the world would you be doing this now? For what purpose? And you watch this GBTC and you see how it's acting here, and you can see where this would get just if Bitcoin moved higher. And then, of course, you can see here as well how we're holding that level. But what if they win this appellate court case? Well, we have a position in this as a special situation in our community. And I think we're in it at 19. We're not up a lot, up $1.50, maybe close to 10% now, not even 10%. And what I'm looking at is, I think there's a possibility here that happens. But let's say that it doesn't happen. It stays the same, and for some reason this thing trades at a discount because you can't redeem it. Well, why in the world is BlackRock out there, Fidelity, and ARK all running into something that they can't do? It doesn't make any sense, right? So they must think that they're going to be able to do it. Also, on Friday, we had that statement by the SEC. Well, since when does the SEC issue a statement that filings are inadequate as they currently are? So if you really read that statement that dropped Bitcoin the other day, okay, and we just kind of drill into that, right, and what happened. So you can see the move right here, and let me just drop this over. So you can see the move right here. And this is when the SEC came out with their statement, right? And we actually had Bitcoin just plummet. We dropped down to, what was that, roughly? About 5%, 1,500 in like 15 minutes or something insane. Why would they issue that statement? It just doesn't make any sense. They don't issue statements like that. The only reason they issue that statement is to help the people that did the filing. And I think that when people started connecting the dots, they started to realize that. So there's rumors that floating around about the SEC and leadership change. I don't know any of that. I don't know what that does to the market. All I can tell you is that I find the timing of all these ETFs that just happen to be around the same time that GBTC is going to get their verdict. It's supposed to come out end of May, so they're expecting it any day now. I find it very interesting timing. Now, that said, MicroStrategy's, his average cost is around 30, right? We're going to say it's around 30. I think it's like 29 and change. Okay. So if you figure out the market cap when the stock was here, it was trading right around the exact price of the Bitcoin position, which is kind of insane if you think about it. People say, well, they have debt. Yeah, there's also a business here, and that business is worth, well, let's just do it this way so we can take a look and say, okay, well, what is that business worth, right? Just so you think about it a little differently. Well, this is when they said they were going to start buying Bitcoin in here. So let's just say that they were at $170 when they said they were going to buy Bitcoin. And now let's just add a 20% discount to that, take $34 off of it, take 40 off, right? Just to make the math simple, okay? That puts us at 130, 140 value on the stock without any Bitcoin holdings, which was right around here before they started buying. All right, so we add a 20% discount to that because of where the market is, even though market's higher, we obviously have this nonsense. But so you look at it and go, okay, well, that's $100, $130 in the stock. Right now, I'm trading right at where their valuation is in their Bitcoin position. So we're basically evaluating the company that does about $100 million in revenue a quarter at zero. Okay, just think about that for a second. Think about how little sense that makes, right? So what I would suggest is that this has massive potential. This is something that we bought. I think we're up 40 bucks on it, 35 bucks, something like that. I do think that we have the potential to get up to this level. I really would not sleep on these Bitcoin names. I'm not out there saying Bitcoin's going to be the currency and we're all going to walk around with Bitcoin. That's not what I'm saying. What I think is, I think you could see a 30% move in Bitcoin. I think that's a possibility. And then I think that if you see something like that, the magnitude that you're going to be able to make in these names is going to be orders of magnitude on what Bitcoin's going to move. And so far, that theory seems to be playing out. This is Mara, and even more calls being bought in Mara on a relative basis than you do in Microsoft right now, which is kind of crazy. But if you take a look at Mara and what's going on here, what we're seeing this level hold, right? So we pop over, it seems to hold. Okay. I don't know the difference between the miners. If you want to comment below and explain the difference to me, I don't know. I know people will look at Riot and say, oh, I have to get involved in Riot. Okay, that technically, all I can do is tell you the technicals. That does not look anywhere near as appealing to me, right? And just to kind of FYI, I mean, here you are. Do I want to be that guy? Not particularly. I mean, I'm happy that you're over that, anchored VWAP. Where do I want to be this guy? Right? I mean, this is a no-brainer. I'm already through all my nonsense. All my nonsense was down here, right? And now I'm through it. Now I've got these other levels I have to watch, but go look at the option activity on this. People are going out for months out to the 20s. And I can see why. I mean, you start getting through these levels I just marked, and then you start looking up here. There's something to that. So this is one sector that I would definitely pay attention to. And what you're seeing again is you're seeing themes, right? And I don't know if GBTC wins that or doesn't win that. I have no way of knowing that. I can just tell you that there must be something to it. When I read it, I thought it was very clear how the appellate court was leaning, but that doesn't mean that I'm right. I really have absolutely no idea what they're going to do. But if I look at this, and let's just say, again, they lose, well, I'm still at a discount to Bitcoin, and I can still trade up if Bitcoin goes up, which it's been doing anyway. Something to think about. Now, Tesla. Now, I'm not going to get into all the deliveries on this because everybody's seen them. Huge deliveries, better than expected. Things are going better than expected. They're talking about their AI model. We're up. All I'm going to do is be real technical here and just say, watch 277.47. This was the level that we were watching pre and post all day long. It was very, very clear how that level was marked. It was very clear what happened when you broke below that level and how you acted. I think it was a great quarter for them, or a great release for them, I should say. And you can see that from the gap. And we'll see what happens this week on it. I do think that there was something here that people are really grossly misunderstanding about the company. But it is possible that you break this, kind of backfill and go higher. For me, if I was in this, I would be looking at that bar, and I really wouldn't be. And people say, well, it was light volume because it was a holiday. Well, I don't look at it that way, right? Because some bars didn't have light volume. So you roughly closed at 50% of that bar. It's good. It's not great. So I would really watch this. The deliveries were better than expected. Everybody knows that. That's why the stock is up. You have some nonsense right here. If you go take a look at this on a weekly basis, drop this down, and what I'll do is I'll just drop it in this way, and then you can just kind of see right here how we held that level, right? So you can see real clear here how you can easily get up, right? I mean, everybody sees these levels right here that you keep hitting, and you can see we're getting right near it. So you're roughly getting to that, right? If you get to that like 300 level, that's probably something to pay attention to, at least it is for me. So I want to watch that. I want to watch how we act at that DTL, and that really ties us right into this, doesn't it? So that's something to watch as well that I think is pertinent. I will say this, that RIVN surprised me. And it's been a long time since I've gotten surprised by a company, the more I read about it, candidly. So I have a theory that the majority of these companies, if not all of them, are essentially zeros, right? And I've been pretty adamant about that for some time. I could be wrong here on this one. The more that I read, and we're going to go through a little bit of it. The one thing that they are doing exceptionally well, and we're going to discuss this, is this SUV. Nobody has this. No, they have something that Tesla does not have. They do not have this hot SUV that people want. And it's actually a pretty good looking car. I mean, I'll give it to them. It is. And I could see why people want it. Now, I put my lines in, and I'm basically an EKG chart. So I'm not really going to get too excited that I'm above them or that they're curling higher, right? Because we've been here before, and until I start developing a trend like we did here, to me, these moving averages really don't hold a lot of value. So what I can do is I can look at this and go, okay, well, that's really very interesting, isn't it? Yep. We had this base, and now we're breaking out on huge volume. So this is definitely something that I would be paying attention to because of that, right? You want to see these kinds of volume moves break out, and that's what's happening here. We had people that played this in the room. They did exceptionally well with it the other day on Monday. Always mark your pre-market highs. You can start getting through your pre-market highs. You know, it's pretty much it. It's pretty much a wrap, especially when you're news driven. It tells you pretty much everything you need to know. Just mark your pre-market highs. Same with your pre-market lows. After producing 30, let's call it 9,400 vehicles in the first quarter of the year and delivering 8, off to a slow start as they were retooling their assembly line. All right. Despite the slow start, they said they would accelerate output throughout the year by streamlining production. This is where it gets interesting, at least to me. So far, the move seems to be paying off. So they have 14,000 coming out of that plant now. Okay, 14,000 coming out of that plant. Well, that's more than they were supposed to have, right? They had an 11,000 forecast. So now we're at 14,000. Well, I mean, it's not really that hard to do that math and see that they beat that number substantially, right? So they beat the estimate by about 33% roughly, okay? And the increase from first quarter 48% is pretty impressive. So they're getting to an economy of scale. This is where I think it gets interesting. Rivian believes it's on track to deliver 15,000 of the annual production guidance. Well, I don't have to be a math major, 14 times 3. So if they don't grow at 48% and they didn't retool, right, and they didn't make things go faster, which obviously they're going to make things go faster, this is why they retooled, right? Again, not rocket science. So they're going to make things go faster, all right? So things go faster, right? As things go faster, do you think they're going to come out with more than 14,000 vehicles next quarter? So the answer is yes, they probably are. I would keep my eye on this. I think they're going to probably crush this annual production number, and that annual production number is what's driving the stock. The CFO said the EV maker was beginning to see some relief regarding the supply chain. That's a good sign, too, that they're able to get what they need to get. And I thought this was interesting, too. Added, the EV maker is seeing a robust backlog of pre-orders that extend into 24. Okay. Also, as it shifts to focus on the R1S electric SUV production to meet demand. Well, we don't really have a cool SUV out there that's electric. We just don't really have one. And I could see why somebody would buy that. And I think that there's a missing market for something like this. So there is something to this, and it is something that I'm going to be paying a little bit more attention to. I don't currently have a position in it, but when I start looking at the vehicle and people start saying, oh, I see them on the roads all the time now, you have my attention now. So this is something that I would put on your radar. Smart money, dumb money. And what I think is really pertinent here are a couple things. One, the quote, dumb money is not really going away, is it? It's actually getting stronger. And two, what's happening here? Well, we're starting to watch institutions get involved. I think this is really powerful. And I find it extremely powerful that we're this wide. And the last time that we were anywhere near this was back here. And we can see what happened to the market during that period of time. So I don't think it's something that you guys should be playing around with. I will say this again. I'd be really careful on what type of information you're taking in. Make sure that it's objective information. A lot of people calling for the sky is falling, and I've seen this happen a lot. I don't know what's going to knock the market down. Everybody wants to be an economist. Quite frankly, when we get to that part of it and you start seeing what's going on in the economy, it's really hard to, in my opinion, to be negative. Now, this is something we have not looked at for a while. This is Sentiment Trader, and I think this is pretty interesting, so I thought it was worth bringing up. So we can see right here where the bottom is, right? And we can all see that. It was in December or October, actually, right? So we know where the bottom was, and then we went to the December selling season. And you can see the entire time from here on out, we peaked, and then how long it took for that peak to kick in, right? And I'm going to just walk through that again. Here's the peak of New York Stock Exchange margin debt as a percentage of growth, right? Okay, there's your peak. And then what happens? About 6 to 8 months later, you start to see this, right? So here's our bottom, okay? And we're just really starting, aren't we? So that turn right there is something that we need to pay attention to. If you look at that turn and you look at where you're at in regards to that turn, you're just beginning here. And this is not something that I would sleep on. You're still at New York Stock Exchange margin debt. You're still at negative growth. Now let's talk about this because the market moved ahead of this. Well, why would that happen? Well, that's pretty simple, right? People were using cash. Now they're not using cash. They're starting to use margin, but they're still at a negative rate. So there is a ton of money still on the sidelines. We go through that small speculators index all the time. There is a ton of money on the sidelines here. And this is something that I think really pay attention to. This obviously is the bottom. And yeah, I do think it's going to call the bottom, very similar to what it did here. Okay, maybe not as fast, just as it did here, called the top, just not as fast. These are data points. And if you start, it just makes sense. If margin debt increases, then obviously net positions are increasing in the market. And you're still negative despite how much we've moved in the market. In front of us is the 2-10-year inversion. And what we keep hearing is this always shows that we're in a recession. And the recession happens later down the line, right? Happened here after that inversion, happened here. We undercut here in 1989, and then we had a recession in 1990, 1991, and you can kind of see how this goes, right? The undercut, and then it's a year later. I'm not saying that we're not going to have a recession, but there's two things that people are assuming. Number one, they're assuming if there is a recession that the market's going to come in because corporate profits are going to drop. There's a couple things that we're going to have to go over there just and kind of talk about. But if I look here and look at this period of time, 1980, and you go 80, 80, and you start coming out of it, and you go, okay, now we're in 82, right? By the time this starts settling down, where are we? We're about 82. And then you look at where we are right now. So you're at that level that we haven't really seen since the 80s, right? So the only data point that we really have is what did the market do during the same period of time that we had this? And I think that that's really where your head needs to be. Instead of just saying, oh, we're going to go into a recession, I have my belief on that. We're going to explain the difference here. First and foremost, when we were going through these periods of time, you were going through very slow growth, right? You're not coming off huge inflationary peaks here. You're not coming off huge inflationary peaks here. Okay. Was there some heat in the market because everybody had a lot of money? Yeah, but you were not going through huge inflationary peaks. So there's a very substantial difference between these and what happened here, which was the mother of inflation, which is exactly what we have here. And this gets really important. So in front of us is CPI. And what I want to show you is just the year-over-year CPI. And you can see 79, 80, 81, and that double digit, right? And we were pretty darn close to double digits here. I actually think we were much higher than they're alluding to. But in 1982, you see 6, and then you start seeing 3, then you start seeing upticks again, and then you start seeing upticks again. But this drop here, The only thing we have on record similar to what we're dealing with right now, the closest thing we have, 81, 82, 83. And you can see that drop from here versus here, right? And 82, again, we're cut in half. And we're going through something similar right now. Now, in front of us, we have from 1980 all the way up to 87, which we obviously know there's a crash up here. Everybody's fully aware of that crash. But I think what's important are a couple things. Number one, this is exactly when we had that double-digit inflation, and then the inflation started to turn, and right before that turn, we see an inflection point. So we have a lower low, lower low, lower low, and then you can just see these lower highs, lower highs, lower highs, until one day we just reverse. Okay. And you can kind of see that DTL coming straight across too, right? I mean, pretty sure everybody can see that. And over the next 5 years, the S&P was up 211%. Fast forward to today, and if we just take a look at this, you can see this, oops, I'll get used to it. Lower low, right? Lower low, lower low. And then you have what? Lower high, and then what happens? Well, then you get a DTL, just like that. And then you break that DTL, very similar to what you did in 1982, and then you push higher. Now, people will say it's not the same thing. That's fine. Nothing is ever the same. But all we have is what's happened in the past, and then we can relate that to the future. What people are missing here is that CPI is inflation. As inflation drops, okay, as inflation drops, that's my little diagram of inflation, okay, corporate profits go up. Okay, as inflation drops, corporate profits go up. Well, people will say, well, that can't, how's that work? Well, think about it. Inflation's dropping, the PPI is dropping, which is what corporations pay for goods that then make those goods and sell them to us, right? If you take a look at how this whole thing works, as inflation drops, did your burrito get cheaper, or did they leave it at the same price when you went and bought a burrito, right? It stayed at the same price. Chipotle's not giving up that price until you stop going there. Corporations are not going to lower their prices. Now, when that starts to happen, you might start having some issues, but you're not even remotely there yet. That's without us getting into the other drivers of the market. But that's why corporate profits go up. That's why you're seeing companies such as Wingstop being upgraded, right? People are all about this company now and they love it. Besides that, they're adding stores and everything. It's their cost of goods. Look at Chipotle. Look at any of these restaurant kind of companies. They're all setting up to break out. And the reason for that is because of what I just walked you through. Really important that you connect the dots for yourself and you think critically about what's going on here. That's it.